Welcome to our adult class. We are in Revelation chapter 18, and usually I mark in my papers where we ended our discussion. Last week we were busy chasing a rabbit, and I don't know that I marked that. And the reason, pardon? All right, good. I'm always studying ahead, so you say, well, it ought to be easy to know. But then again, I'm thinking and making application to the verses ahead, and I look back and say, well, where did we end? All right, but thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate that. I actually had marked, where did I mark? I guess it was around verse 9. But anyway, I wasn't for sure that was accurate. Let's go back. I don't know where to start reading there. Let's go ahead and start back at verse 1 for the context, and we won't go back and look at the first few verses very much, but let's read through this chapter, and I fully intend on completing this chapter this morning if possible, and we'll jump into the 19th chapter. But let's read together this 18th chapter. Revelation 18, verse 1. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works in the cup which she hath filled to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she said in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more, merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet, and all thine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of the most precious wood, and of brass and iron and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company and ships and sailors, and many as trade by the sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein was made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians, and of pipers and of trumpeters, shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman, of whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee. And she found, and the sound of a millstone that shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. All right, in this chapter it becomes rather clear and evident that Babylon, Rome, the great enemy of the church, the early church, has fallen. It is the end. And this chapter reaffirms that. It also reaffirms the fact that so many of those who traded with her were feeling the impact of her demise. And again, this is talking about spiritually Rome and the problems. But imagine, as an instance, for instance, America, if we fell overnight, think how the world would be cast into a Great Depression. Of all the trade, you think of, for instance, just the automobile industry. Yes, we have vehicles made here in the U.S., but think of all the automobiles made in Japan that are brought here, in Germany that are brought here, in Sweden that are brought to our shores. And we could go on. You think of all the many things from food items that are shipped over to these seas. America is certainly an exporter of grain and other products. But I mean, think of all the different things that are brought from China over here, and the trade deficit is certainly large with China. But again, imagine if all this ended overnight, so to speak. The whole world would truly be cast into a depression because of an economics. And that's almost what you're seeing here depicted. As he said there, let's drop down. We said we stopped at verse 9. Alas, Babylon, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And you've seen this in numerous places when it says, for in 1 hour. What does that depict? Again, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Yes. You know, we have a phrase, almost overnight. I mean, it was sudden. It wasn't something that was, this is going to happen over a period of weeks and months and then maybe 2 or 3 years. No, this happened relatively quick. At least in their minds, it was quick. And that is the idea. You read other places in Scripture that judgment can come quickly upon us. You look at some of the kings of the Old Testament who were ungodly, and you see the demise, their fall happen rather rapidly. Absolutely, Catherine, and that's the application I think we can make there for us. To be ready always, because as Jesus gave in various parables, no man knows the hour. Even at that time, he didn't know when the Son of Man would return. But not only for the second coming, but certainly for death for each of us. Who knows the day of our death? Well, we don't know. But we certainly know that it will come. And seemingly overnight, judgment had come. Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. I used America as an illustration a moment ago, but you can see if you'll stop and think about all the different things that we buy from afar. We send some things afar, exporting, but by and large, we import more as a nation than we export. But think how it would affect others. Well, it was the same way here with Rome. Rome was the greatest power of the day. They controlled so much land, cities, and the like. And when Rome began to fall and have demise, it truly brought down those around them. And then things began to be enumerated here or listed. Verse 12, gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, thine wood. Does anyone know what thine wood is? I looked it up, and this is from my studies actually from last week. I think I'm correct when I say this, but it had a fragrant, I can't say the word already, smell. Have you ever cut into cedar? It has that rich, smell. Well, yes, it was a scented wood, and it was considered valuable. Something that you would trade in. All right. In other words, it was something that most people would enjoy having. I just looked it up here. Thayer says it was a citrus and odor. Anyway, it had an odor to it. It was reused for incense, prized by the ancient Greeks and Romans on account of the beauty of its wood for various ornamental purposes. So that kind of gives you an idea of why it was traded the way that it was. It was valuable, but all these things were missing. And I think it's interesting when you read through all these things. Let's just go ahead and get the next verse. It's the same idea. Cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense, which again has to do with spices and fragrant things which had a pleasant smell to them. Wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and the souls of men. All these things that's what they were missing. Isn't it sad, though, that so many things here, when John sees this vision that people were grieving over physical things that they were missing now because of the end or the demise of Rome. What about spiritual things? What about righteousness? What about things of that? No, they were just worried. It was all about physical things. We miss this. We miss that physically. And so often people are worried about money and possessions and things like that. But that's what they were missing. And it is unfortunate. It's sad. I'm rambling. I can only base this in my brief lifespan. But as I've mentioned many times before, 30 years ago or longer, when I was preaching full time, you could find people who were interested in studying the Bible. You really could. And now it seems like no one cares. I hate to say that. But you talk to people or whatever, and I've had occasions, just strangers asking if they want to study the Bible. I think you have to have some rapport with them in general before you're doing so. But some people that, I see very often that we get to know on a somewhat of a personal basis, I've asked them, would you be interested in studying the Bible? No, but if I do, I'll let you know. And it's kind of the general response. But imagine how things would be if there was some kind of catastrophic event here in America where, let me go back. My great-grandparents, your great-grandparents, if you're old enough to be in this audience, it would fall in that category. Did they have running water in their houses? No, they had spring boxes probably. Yes. Sometimes they would have had wells, things like that. On the little property that I own, on the back side of it, there is a spring coming out of, call it the mountain there, the little ridge there. And down from it, there's remnants of an old concrete box that folks years ago had concreted up. And Brian and I were back there just a week ago, and that water now, you stick your finger in as it comes out of the mountain, and it's cold. And that's what they used to put their milk in and other things. That was their refrigerator at the time. I'm saying all that to say this. If we would instantly be taken back 2 to 3 generations, think things wouldn't be different? Well, I fear there would be a great deal of robbery and theft and carnage and death. But don't you think people would be looking more up? In most of our homes, we go over, if we're uncomfortable, we just adjust this thing on the wall. We turn the air conditioning up maybe a little more, or down, or the heat, whatever. Our life would change so much if we didn't go to a cabinet or a cupboard or whatever you want to call it, or a refrigerator, and we open the door and an abundance of food. If there were no grocery store, we have, they're predicting snow in the winter a day or two ahead of time, and what happens? And, almost empty the grocery store, at least of certain things. And it's kind of comical because, at least here where we live, you give it 4 or 5 days and everything's back to normal. But what would it be like if we had some major thing? I think many people would look up more. They would realize these things, not all that important, Bob, but spiritual things, they are. Yeah. Chip? Well, it does, and the church did grow. And in the first century, it's interesting when you start reading the Acts of the Apostles, the actions of the apostles, the events of the apostles, the work of the apostles. Very early on in Acts chapter 3, 4, and 5, you read about, 3 and 4 anyway, you read about the persecutions that come upon them. The chief priests, the leaders of the people who had Jesus crucified. And now here was Peter and John, that man looked upon them, wanting alms, and Peter said, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have I given to thee. Arise, take up thy bed and walk. And what a great miracle that was. And people, of course, eager to hear the message. And Peter says, by the man, it's not a quote, but he goes on to say, it's by the power of Jesus whom you've crucified. And the chief priest, and later they put them in prison and trying to, don't talk about this man anymore. And it's almost like a fire that had started, and they were trying to stamp it out, and the more they stomped on it, the more it just spread. The wind caught it, and but things were a lot more difficult then. The widows that stood by Dorcas weeping, what were they showing whenever? Wasn't it Peter that showed up that ultimately raised Tabitha from the grave? What were they showing the people, the widows and those that stood by the tomb, stood by? What were they showing others? Talking about her work. Pardon? Yes, the coats and the garments that she had made. Who were that for the widows and those who were the poorest of the people? But, and that's why they loved her because of what she had. Absolutely. But I'm saying it was we would call it a little thing. I imagine everyone in this audience has a closet full of clothes. It wasn't like that then. So, what would life be like if all of a sudden we didn't have all these luxuries? Would more people turn to God? Perhaps. But that's what they were missing with Rome. I'm talking about the surrounding people. Missing all the things financially, no more trade. He talks about ships as we go on down here, because all this is the same. Well, verse 15. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. That was verse 15. And then we went on down, because as we've already read the later passages there, trying to find about the ships and so on. What verse is that? 17. For in 1 hour so great riches has come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and the many as trade by the sea stood afar off. And of course it goes on. The next verse says, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is likened to this great city? Why were they crying? Why were they grieving because of the demise of Rome? Well, trade, money. Again, that's what they were missing.
People look up to God, but they can also look to material things.
Very true.
Where your heart is, And these people, apparently, their heart was just in the materialistic type of things.
Yeah, last night, determining what I was going to preach on this morning, I went back and read several passages and actually started to talk about one thing, and then the sermon kind of evolved into something else in my mind. But I'm going to talk about this world's not our home. And I truly fear so often there is a temptation for us to think about this world. In other words, I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm only thinking of tomorrow physically. Okay? Yeah, I mean, I'm not retiring right now, but in the next, few years I hope to. But I've been reading some video or listening to some videos and things like that. YouTube's amazing. But this one guy, and he caught my attention, the things that he said. Something about retiring, now looking back, lessons I learned. Wow, that's interesting. So the first point he made was, when I was planning on retiring, it was all about money. Well, if I put back enough, if I got enough in the IRA, or this account, or this investment, after all, inflation's this, and it's going to be worth less, and am I going to be able to make money, yada, yada, yada. And now he says, that's not the issue. Oh, that's right, Catherine, I agree 100%. Of course, he wasn't, his video had nothing to do with spirituality. But what he went on to say was, he said, I didn't take under consideration that it would be my health. That now I've got this health problem and that health problem, this health and that health problem. And all the money in the world, which he didn't say he had, but it was worthless. Oh yeah, I've got plenty to eat, but what good is it when this hurts and that hurts and I can't do this and I can't hardly walk, or I've got this ailment. He didn't go in detail what kind of health problems he had, okay? And I thought, that how true. Again, and I think it's valid for us to prepare for retirement. I truly believe that. And yeah, I'm in control of I'm talking about monetarily things. That I need to make sure. I'd be foolish to retire when I couldn't live properly and provide for my wife. I'd be foolish to do that. I think that's common sense. But there's other things too. And that's what he was saying. Now he's got enough money to take a trip, but I don't want to go on a trip because I don't feel like going on a trip, is the idea, okay? But anyway, I'm going to talk about this world's not our home tonight. Oh, there's no question about that, and many people do that kind of thing. 1 Timothy chapter 6, for they that will be rich fall into temptation and snare and many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. The idea when he says, for they that will, W-I-L-L, if you look that word up in the Greek, the word means for they that will be rich, for those that have a mind to be rich. They have a desire to be rich. That is their drive. That is their goal, to have more. And yeah, but what happens, go back to Luke chapter 12. The man who had the crops and they did well, he pulled his barns down, built greater, propped his feet up, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And what did God say? Thou fool, tonight thy soul shall be required of thee. So none of that gives us hope ultimately. And I want to talk about, maybe I shouldn't give out the lesson tonight or this morning, but I want to talk about how, again, this world's not our home and how our focus shouldn't be everything physical. Well, I understand that, and I do work for some car dealerships. It happened to be a new car dealership in Johnson City. If I mention his name, probably some of you would even know the man. but he's still working. I guess he's in his 70s. Very sharp mentally. Physically, he appeared to be all right. I don't know, but I said, when are you going to retire and get out of here? He said, what am I going to do? I said, well, I don't know. Don't you have any hobbies? No. He said, I don't know anything but work. What am I going to do? He said, stay here. And I thought, well, okay. I mean, he had a point, I guess. I can think of other things I think I'd like to do. But isn't that sad when you begin to think about it, that, Oh, I agree, Catherine. Sometimes it is greed. I talked with a woman just yesterday, and she was single. I don't know if she's ever been married. She's from the Bird Club. We had a little outing yesterday, but my point being, she turned 70 here in just a few days, a month or two, and she said she's going to keep working. And I said, well, you won't get any more money waiting after 70 because you capped there. And she said, no, I'll go ahead and retire. She said, but I'll just go ahead and keep working. Well, if she wants to, I don't care what she does, or anybody in that sense, in that frame. But my point is, let's be sure that spiritual things are our priority, because I am going to leave this earth. No. Yes. I didn't know that. I mean, I hadn't heard.
Yeah, and in reality, that's
Sad, isn't it?
Even on a smaller scale, do we have time for God? I mean, so much stuff going on in our life.
Listen, the parable. Do you remember the parable of the soils? So often we forget those parables. The simplest of parables. Some seed fell on the hard ground. Well, the fowls there came and picked it up, whatever. Some seed fell on the shallow ground, which took root. It germinated quickly, it grew. But when the sun came out, persecutions and trials just withered. But the most dangerous of those that I think fits most of us, notice I did this broad circle here, was the third soil. The weeds and the briars. And when they asked Jesus, when he explained that, Mark's account says, let me see if I can just turn and read it, because I hate to miss this. You might even get to hear it again tonight, but when he talks about, trying to think where it's at in Mark's account, Matthew, it's chapter 13. Let me just turn over there and find this real quickly. But anyway, it was the cares and the riches and what he was talking about, the responsibilities of life. And all of us are in that category. Okay, Paul said, if any man not work, neither should he eat. Yes, I've got to work. I've got to labor. I've got to be somewhere in the morning. I've got jobs to do. That's a responsibility. We have, if we enjoy running water, I've got to pay a water bill. If we enjoy electricity, I've got to pay that bill. We need car insurance, according to the state, to drive our automobiles. But I can't get to work without an automobile. Automobiles expensive? Oh, yes, they are. I mean, we can go through this long list. If you have a wife, she likes to eat too, okay? If you have children, they like to eat. They have health care needs. We have to take them to the doctor. I mean, we've got all these things about us on a daily basis. And the cares, the riches, and the responsibilities of this life, we get so preoccupied with them that we forget about what's truly important. And now I don't have time to come on Wednesday night. I don't have time to come on Sunday morning or Sunday night. And things just get, spiritual things get just pushed off to the side because I'm thinking about how I'm going to make the house payment or rent or whatever the case might be. But that's the idea here. And I think that is a problem. Pardon? Oh, I just love you, Indy. All right, Mark chapter 4. Jesus, he gives these parables, and then he begins to explain the parables. Verse 19. Listen to this, or I'll drop back to verse 18. And these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word, and the cares of this world. If you look up the word cares, it'll be responsibilities. Every person in this auditorium has responsibilities. I mean, we just have them. That's part of life, living physically. The cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. Why do you think he calls it deceitfulness? What is deceitfulness first? What does it mean? If I say that's deceitful, what do I mean? All right, it's a lie. When you use the word deceit, you're using the word to define it. But you're right. It is deceptive. It's being misleading. It's promising something that doesn't deliver. Okay? Yeah, they do indeed. And we'll explain that in just a minute. Let me finish that. That's a good passage, Ronnie. But the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches. Wealth promises us this comfort of satisfaction. It doesn't deliver. We talked about the rich fool earlier, where he says, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. I've got all this. I've got my big barns. Prop thy feet up. It doesn't say that, and God said, thou fool, tonight thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall those things be? So they promise us this utopia of happiness, of fulfillment, and that's everything I need, and I've got life made, and it's deceptive. There you go. It truly is. Now, do we need things? Do we need things in life? Sure we do. We got to have shelter. We need somewhere to get in out of the blazing hot sun, or when it's raining, or when it's snowing, or when it's cold. Yeah, we need shelter. We've got to have water to drink. The body demands food to eat. We need clothes to cover ourselves. Sure. There's things. In our world today, we've got to have transportation if we're getting from point A to Z, to go to work, to come to service as we are. Anyway, we all have needs. But that was the thing here in this parable. The cares and the riches. I've lost my place. Let me see if I can find it again. Yeah, if you haven't noticed, I forgot my glasses. The cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things, the desires of other things, entering in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. Choke the word, it becomes unfruitful. And the example he uses was thorns and thistles. You ever raise a garden? Most of you have. If you didn't raise one, you probably worked in one growing up. Connie and I, we raise one most every year. And this true confession here on my part, beans and corn, I'm Johnny on the spot. I'll keep those unless it just comes a big rain and rain and rain. But I'll keep those rototillered and I'll hoe them 2 or 3 times. But the potatoes, bless their hearts, they're about on their own after they get planted. And after the beans and corn get in, then, tomatoes or whatever, if anything left in the field, it just gets neglected. And when it does, it's not long to what happens? There's a tomato plant in here somewhere. Where is it? I mean, and does it do any good? No, doesn't do any good. Why? Because other things choke it out. And it becomes unfruitful. And we become lukewarm. Revelation chapter 3. Because thou art neither hot nor cold, thou art lukewarm. He said, I'll spew thee out of our mouth, or out of his. And meaning, it's not what God wants us to be. And you're getting a sermon preached early, but you kind of get the idea. Oh, that's right. And again, I want to make this sure. certain. There's nothing wrong with material things. There's nothing wrong with anything new, whether it be a car, a house, a camper, a boat, whatever. There's nothing wrong with any of that per se. But if I put my hope and trust in that and I neglect the spiritual part of life, then where do I stand? Absolutely. Absolutely. All that is true. In the rest of this chapter, our time is up. It's the same idea being presented. People are grieving and mourning Rome's demise. The last verse, chapter 18, and in her was found the blood of the prophets, of the saints, and all that were slain upon the earth. In other words, that's what brought about her end, her sin. Rome's sin brought about, as a consequence, her demise. All right, Lord willing, we'll start at chapter 19. I appreciate all the participation. I think it helps us to think about all those things and make application to it as we go through this book. All right, you are at liberty, as Tom used to say, at 11.